So here at MTC, we help parents of highly sensitive children and teens break out of the pattern of the meltdown shutdown cycle in as little as 8 weeks. This is kids who are feeling big feelings, but matched with even bigger behaviors. And those behaviors can be hitting, kicking, screaming, throwing their bodies on the floor, running away. And teenagers present with behaviors that are typically more isolative. So they might be running up to their room, just staying in their room for days on end, refusing to follow through on expectations, or even to join the family at dinner time, isolating, staying either glued to their phone or on Netflix or what have you, and disconnecting from family relationships. And as a parent in any of these circumstances, you can wonder, do I really need to know what's going on with my kid? Or do I just need to be consistent with the rules and the expectations? Do I just need to make sure that my child is fed and clothed and well cared for from their physical standpoint, take them to school? And so as a parent, you can obviously want that emotional connection, but it's important to understand whether or not it's necessary, right? Especially if for you being raised as a child, if you didn't feel like you were emotionally connected effectively to your parents, you can wonder whether or not your child will be fine growing up without this connection to you. So Autumn, let's talk about one of the things that parents can wonder about in this dynamic. What are parents thinking about, especially related to their teenagers, when they're feeling like they don't really get why their teen is blowing these emotions into what parents might assume is out of proportion? Why a teen might be having what they assume to be an overreaction to any sort of experiences that they're having or circumstances going on in their life. Especially when parenting a sensitive teen. Thoughts and wonderings that parents bring to us. Let's talk about that now.
Well, I think you can kind of just start with some of the things that we just hear in our culture in general, right? Oh, they're just a teenager. Oh, that's just normal behavior for a teenager. Oh, you're not really supposed to understand teenagers. They can only understand each other, right?
A rare breed.
Yeah. I was a teenager once. I know how that goes, right? Kind of these underlying messages that we get all of the time and when you really kind of sit back and you think about it, a lot of those messages are there as a way to provide relief to you as a parent, right? As that thought comes in, oh, it's just because they're a teenager, or this is just normal teenager behavior. Maybe you're using that phrase to explain some things that really aren't normal teenager behavior, or they're not normal teenage behaviors for a healthy, functioning, teenager. Really, in those times, it might be more about that's something that you're saying to yourself because you're not really sure what else to do. And you're noticing that there's something that feels uncomfortable for you or feels off, right? So especially when we're talking about, behaviors like isolating, right? Human beings need other human beings to feel happy. So this nonsense that you can live on your computer in your room and still be a happy person, that's just part of being a normal teenager. It's just that it's nonsense. I was looking at a study recently where they polled a group of teenagers, and 56% of the teenagers polled said that they believe they have an addiction to electronics, to social media, and would like to not be on social media enough. 56%.
That's
right.
Insane. Yeah.
If we are living, we are living with a belief system that your teen wants to be in their own, they want to be isolated away, separated from their family, or that they want to be separated from engaging in community activities. That's not a reality of somebody that's really functioning in a healthy place. That's somebody that is trying to escape and that doesn't really know how to find a sensation of happiness or a sensation of inclusion. That's somebody that's just not sure how to do that. On the flip side, you may have your teenagers that are, engaging in behaviors like running away, right? We can say running away, not running away to a different state, but running away as in maybe leaving the house without permission, or getting really upset, right? And not being sure how to communicate that with other family members, not being sure how to feel understood in their environment. And they start to maybe feel trapped after they've been isolating for that long. And they try to talk, it comes out as a bunch of snaps. You snap back. Why are you talking to me like that? Right? Again, normal reaction if we're not really speaking the same language. If your teenager doesn't have the skills to handle the emotions that are coming up for them, they might just walk out that door. They might go looking for the friendships that they do feel capable of having, which maybe are not the most effective friendships for them.
Right.
So that's kind of what I think we see, just as a general starter for this topic of, should I understand my teen or not? Or is that, just part of teenager parent dynamic? I don't get you, you don't get me. It's not really something we tell ourselves.
And so when we look at this as a symptom of the shutdown refusal cycle, then it's a heck of a lot easier to feel empowered as a parent to want to change it, right?
Right.
So, especially hearing that research that you just touted, right? More than half of teenagers globally, right? In that study, just non-highly sensitive and highly sensitive alike, realize that they have a problem and want to fix it. Right. In terms of the self-isolation on devices. And so as a parent, when you notice that all your teen does right now is sit on their phones or sit on their laptop or their tablet, you could simply jump to the conclusion that that's what they desire, that that's what they're interested in right now. That's just what they're into. It's what they want. And so it's really important to notice that more than 1 out of every 2 recognizes that they feel miserable and realizes that they don't want to feel miserable. No child was put on this earth to feel miserable. We all know that. And we're noticing that teens have a lot of the insights that they need to make these changes. And so in observing that dynamic, it's incredibly important that you as a parent start to observe what's possible for your teen in this situation. First, we need to understand the consequences of this belief. If you hold on to this belief, that it creates patterns in the way that you parent. Which, we want to make sure that we're tying these connections to you here today so that you notice how pervasive this challenging thought is to keep as a parent. And so let's talk about some of the things that patterns that parents engage in if they believe that they don't need to understand their teen, or that it's just normal to not understand where your teen is coming from or understand your teen's thinking pattern. That's just par for the course in parenting an adolescent.
Yeah. So when you guys are on different pages, I'll put it that way. When you're on different pages, and when there really isn't the an underlying curiosity, an underlying desire to really get on the same page and to understand the perspective of your teen, to kind of understand their frame, right? That leaves you guys both vulnerable to creating different ruptures in your relationship. And when I say different, what I mean are different kinds of ruptures within your relationship. And so some of it might be things like you just end up nitpicking all the time, right? Why'd you do it that way? Why'd you do that? You should have done it this way. Or you didn't do it fast enough, right? Not understanding your teen, not having a way to communicate with one another. You might end up in a situation where your teen is kind of constantly feeling attacked. And so maybe part of that isolation is, if I just don't interact, I don't have to feel attacked. Or, if you're the parent, it might go on the other side of constantly feeling frustrated with the decisions that they're making and not really understanding, why would somebody make that decision, right? Why would, I was working with a teen recently, and the container for the dog poop bags, where they're taking the dog out, the container got into the poop. It it was a situation, went down, lots of big emotions happened, right? And so logical response from this teenager, I'm going to be late from school. All of it went into the trash. The dog poop container, the roll of bags. I don't know what to do with this. I can't carry it home. It costs nothing. We're going to put it into the trash. Teen comes home. Parents question, right? Us being adults, logically, we've dealt with poop before. You wash it off, right? Like this is poop happens. And so then it becomes the conversation,
exactly.
right? Exactly. The conversation quickly moves into, why did you throw that away? What's wrong with you? Why would you make that decision? Teen starts to shut down.
Now I gotta go get another one.
Right. Now I got to go get another one. Now we got to find another one. Right. I've got to take the dog out later while you're at school. And now there's no bags. Those, kind of logical pieces. And there really isn't the understanding of the emotions or the lack of skill set that might have driven that behavior. And instead, there's a lot of frustration on both sides. And we completely kill an opportunity for growth.
Right. Right. And what festers instead is an invalidating environment, right? Because if a parent is jumping to the conclusion that the teen doesn't care, that the teen is just, that your teen just doesn't consider other people,
right?
That is careless, or even just, was not thoughtful in, in throwing it away, right? Or maybe even assuming that it was lost and they didn't notice it, and they, assuming that they weren't paying attention enough to keep track of their things, right? All of that dynamic, when you don't have the skills as a parent to figure out what's really going on here, what was happening. And obviously, dog poop bags is at the end of the world. No, you can probably pick that up at Walmart, or even Home Goods sells those little containers, right? It's not the end of the world to replace it. But this is an example of a mismatch in parenting that perpetuates the ineffective communication style that's going on in the meltdown, shutdown, refusal cycle. Again, what Autumn just shared was the teenager was panicking about future goals that are important to them, and future experiences that are important to them. And the concept of keeping track of a dog poop container was less important, not a high priority, right? But does this mean that the teenager doesn't care? No. And so when a parent has a mismatched understanding based on a lot of assumptions, but also patterns, right? If you've been parenting this child of yours for many, many years and not understanding how big the emotions that your teen feels, how complicated the thought processes are, when your teen is moving from one thought to the next and the conclusions that they jump to, then that dynamic creates a larger gap over time. And so then it's easy, if you don't have a method to get straight answers from your kid and really feel like you understand them, and that's been going on for years, you're naturally going to develop the pattern of jumping to conclusions yourself. And so there's nothing, to shame or blame you for this. It's just a mismatch in parenting and a missing strategy, right? So that's a heck of a lot easier to fix than saying that your thinking is never going to be corrected as a parent, and that your teen is always going to be selfish and inconsiderate. And those global beliefs that you might be keeping right now without these skills can be paralyzing. You can watch your teen just grow up before your eyes without feeling any sort of connection in that dynamic, and obviously justifying it because the feeling that sorrow on a daily basis is intolerable. And so the other dynamic on the other side of that, though, is, so there's a lot of independence expected in this dynamic, expecting your teen to know and to read your mind and to know how adults act and what the proper way to respond to life would be, and responding and reacting in kind. The other side of that is treating your teen as fragile and expecting them to, not expecting them to know how to solve these problems. And that creates not independence, but dependence, fosters enablement, right? And so what happens in this dynamic when a teen feels enabled by their parents and when parents feel like they're enabling their teen.
Yeah. So when a teenager is feeling enabled, right? We could say enabled, or it. I'm going to use an example just because I think that it's easier to relate sometimes to some of these patterns that we start to talk about when we can kind of draw from experiences. And so when I think about a teen that has been enabled, or a teen that, because there's this mismatch, there's this disconnection where the parent doesn't really understand their full capacity, right? They don't understand, maybe because of the disconnection, they're not sure really of what their kid actually knows, right? They're not really sure of the skills that they have. And so on the one hand, like you were talking about, you can certainly have the situation where, maybe you make an assumption where, you believe that your child is going to be able to walk into a classroom and advocate for themselves, because you said to them, hey, I need you to walk into this classroom and advocate for yourself. Right. So that's almost like that too much independence, right? There's a complete disconnection around really what is your child's capability, not just do they have the words to do it, but do they have the emotional regulation? Do they have the skills that they need to manage anxiety, to feel confident, to articulate, right? I mean, like, so sometimes it's not just about finding basic words, but it's also about being able to articulate the emotions that they're experiencing and what their wants and needs are. So it might be, that extreme, or the other side of it, not taking into consideration what your teen's skills or abilities are and jumping in to advocate for them in ways that might cause them shame or embarrassment, or may make them feel like they are less than. Right. Yeah. My mom's always jumping in to talk to this teacher before I can even say what it is that I want or that I need. Right. I'm not able to make that decision. What happens when we enable somebody in that way over time is that they don't develop the skills that they need to act for themselves, to be able to determine, what do I need? What do I want? What's my body telling me? Right. This leads to indecision, which can become an expensive habit when you think about it, the level of avoidance that indecision can cause. Later on in life, this can certainly create situations and relationships that are not healthy, that are pretty toxic. And just in the teenage parent relationship, that's frustrating, right? Because over time, as somebody has been enabled, as somebody has, another individual making decisions for them, or doing things for them that they may have the skill set to do, they start to doubt themselves, right? And so that reinforces, oh, if I just hang out and wait around for a while, eventually somebody's going to do it for me. That's going to lead to frustration on the parent's end, right? Why aren't you doing this? Right. And it's going to lead to shame, right? Being one of the big ones that's going to happen on the kid's part, right? And also frustration. Why aren't you just jumping in and doing it for me? You're going to anyways. And then when the kid finally says that, now we've got the blow up, right?
Do you think I am your puppet? What do you think who do you think I am? I'm not your concierge. Like whatever it is, as a parent hearing that, it can lead to all kinds of triggered responses. Kid, don't you think I have a life? I've been trying to teach you to do it yourself. What do you mean you don't think that I ever let you do that? All I've been trying to do is to coax you to do this. Right. And just so the expectations are just consistently not met, but then there's a sabotage component that can be not only not realized by the parent, but also not realized by the teen. Obviously that ineffective way of saying to mom or dad, you know what, might as well not even try, right? There's a helplessness component to that communication style, a victim component to that communication style, which can be really disheartening, but also frustrating to hear as a parent. And then in parents, the dynamic of just wondering, are you going to even try? Should I even ask you to consider trying? And based on all of these patterns. And it's really important that we cover that these are symptoms of that meltdown shutdown refusal cycle that you're experiencing with your teen, it is not part of your teen's personality. And the fact that you brought up the concept of indecision, I mean, I feel like we should do a whole training on just that concept in and of itself. And so I'm going to keep my tangent at bay. Just in our experience of watching people make decisions, in managing the indecision concept and being experts on the highly sensitive personality trait, and especially when it comes to sensitive kids and sensitive teens, and of course their sensitive parents.
Right.
We have a lot to say on that concept, so we'll table that. But I'm going to put that down in my notes. That's what we're going to do. We're doing another show on that. But the experience of not being able to trust yourself and not feeling trusted by your parents because you're not understood by your parents, it creates a lot of pervasive challenges for the teen, and one of them is low self-esteem, right? And so when you can't advocate for yourself, you don't think that you can say to your teacher, you know what, I forgot. Is it okay if I turn it in tomorrow? Can I still at least get half points? Right? As a parent, you might ask your teen, why didn't you turn this in? And they say, oh, I forgot. Why didn't you tell your teacher you left it at home? I don't know. Well, what do you mean you don't know? I don't know. Right? And it doesn't matter anyways, right? And so when a teen doesn't have the skills, their response to a parent who's coming up with, wonderings as to why they didn't solve the problem in a way that feels quite logical to a parent, teen can sound like they don't care.
Right.
But the I don't know what you need to add to the end of that sentence is I don't know how.
Right.
Not from a place of not knowing what to say, but how to tolerate the emotions of what it takes to ask for help, what it takes to ask for, or to admit that you're not perfect, right? You leave the homework at home. A lot of highly sensitive teens are quite perfectionistic. They have a really high need to be, to people please, just to not be a burden, to not put anybody out. And so they don't want to call attention to failure.
Right. And that people pleasing, when you were just talking about the people pleasing, and then when we think about disconnection, really, when you are disconnected from your teen and you are putting them into positions where you're asking them to do things that really aren't on their radar, or that really aren't their interest, or are outside of their abilities or their capabilities at that time, right? So right now, not for forever, but right now, in their life, when, for example, maybe in your mind, my teens played baseball their whole lives. They love to play baseball. Of course, they're going to play baseball. And of course, they want to get scouted by these teams. And of course, they want to be on a travel team. And of course, they want to do all of these things. And maybe there's a disconnection there where the reality is they are engaging in a lot of people pleasing, and they're moving through the steps. But as they're moving through the steps, they're also starting to question themselves, or they're starting to build resentment. And they maybe, I have played baseball my whole life. And you know what I've noticed? I like it. I think it's fun. And I don't really want it to be my life.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to say that to somebody else.
Or I'm really good at it, but I don't enjoy it.
Right.
So the difference between passion and talent. And, but I don't want to put anybody out because the team's relying on me. I'm really good at this.
Right.
I got to help the team. So there's that self-sacrificial, even martyrdom pattern that's happening in adolescence that is not going to be stamped out in young adulthood. I mean, your first job, if you've got that pattern going on in adolescence, it's going to keep going, whether it be college projects or your boss asking you to work an extra shift and you really wanted to go out to dinner with your friends, or you were fried and you were looking forward to your TV night, or whatever it is that you're looking forward to as a young adult. The answer is going to be all right, of course, or sure, no problem, at the sake of yourself. And so when we think about all of these patterns, the answer to our question today is, do I need to understand my teen in order to help them develop, the answer obviously is yes, right? You need to be able to do that. And in order to speak, as Autumn said, speak the same language for your teen. And once you have that capacity to do that, and then you can more effectively pace your teen into meeting the expectations that you have. So it's important to understand that understanding your teen doesn't mean you have to agree with their choices. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with their current skill set or their decisions in that moment, or that you have to agree with how they're trying to get their needs met. What it does mean is that once you have a way to understand your teen and to speak that same language, so that you are asking them to do something and they understand exactly what you mean by that question, then you can help them identify gaps if they feel like they can't meet your needs, if they feel like they can't meet your expectations. You can hear that from them clearly, and then you can guide them more effectively. And obviously that's a heck of a lot easier with a system in place to include making sure that you're having those conversations regularly, and that those conversations are pleasant. Your teen is staying present and not just yeah-ing you or blowing you off and refusing to participate, right? As well as making sure that you as a parent are changing the way that you think about your teen. You're changing your perception of what your teen is capable of. And that goes beyond just understanding the highly sensitive trait. Elaine Aron herself has said in interviews that that young adults who at age 28 still living in the parents' home, when parents are expressing frustration, she has been publicly heard to say, it's okay, they'll move out eventually, right? Well, you need to know how, and you need to have the skill set to understand that at 15, you can absolutely support your teen in moving out at 18, even if that's to college and they come back in the summer, or moving out and finding a way to be independent if they want to find their first job and be financially independent right away. Those are skills that are absolutely available to you as a parent to develop in order to help your teen foster them for themselves. It does not have to wait. You do not have to experience a failure to launch dynamic that is common in this lack of skill for teens who are stuck in that cycle. Again, we talked about this in other shows. You've heard me say this. Our specialty is the highly sensitive person and highly sensitive trait in children and teens who are stuck in the daily meltdown shutdown cycle. Not all highly sensitive teens are stuck in that cycle, but the ones who are, you still need to make sure that you're clear that those expectations you had when you decided to have kids and the dreams you have for your teen, those can still be met. That is not part of the personality trait. It is a symptom of the cycle. And that's absolutely something that you guys can break out of with skill sets. And so I want to make sure that you are aware of that. If this is something that you've noticed you need help with and designing all of the skills that we mentioned today and supporting your teen in taking ownership of building those skills has been difficult for you, it's been hard to figure out how to do that specifically and consistently and systematically, then we encourage you to book a call with our team. Go ahead over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk, TEENTALK, and have a conversation with us about where you're stuck, what your challenges are, what your goals are in order to break out of this pattern, what you want to be able to experience with your teen, and what your teen wants to be able to experience. We'll also cover that with them as well. And if what we do is going to help you reach those goals, then we'll tell you exactly how to break out of that pattern with us. On that phone call, you'll be able to get started right away. And if that's not the proper fit, if we feel like deeper or level of support or more a different approach is necessary, then we will point you in that direction instead. And we're happy to do that. Again, go ahead over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk to break out of this pattern today if you're parenting a kid who is of high school age and over. If you've noticed that this pattern has already started in childhood and your child is in 8th grade or under, then go over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk, and we are happy to speak with you. We look forward to that conversation, and thank you for listening. Have a great day.